Hello, welcome to the Citrus Garden. If you're new here, my name is Christina. If you're not new here, hi, welcome back. It's good to see you. This is a reading for Aries rising, or if you have significant Aries placements in your chart and are needing a neutral energy to balance or harmonize masculine and feminine energies within self, then this reading is for you. So Aries, I'm going to get started with the overall context of your reading today. So we're starting off here. We have this weightlessness card, which was at the bottom of the deck. I feel like this is absolutely your energy. This card talks to me about, first of all, needing to ground, right? Like needing to ground your energy in some way. Because I feel like what's happening for you, Aries, your reading feels very spiritual. It feels very mystical, very, very not necessarily... It's not necessarily describing things that are happening in your physical environment. It's describing things that are happening perhaps spiritually to you. And it's because of this energy around you, it's sometimes this energy can make you feel weightless in that it's almost like this experience of experiencing ecstasy or bliss, if you've ever been high, it's that kind of thing, but not because you're on drugs or anything, just because there's some sort of mystical experience is what's coming through today. And I feel like what you're needing, Aries, is to ground that energy somehow. That's what this... And I feel like it's going to happen naturally is kind of how this is feeling. Because you have here the nourishment and the kindness. I feel like this is you, Aries. It's kind of like it feels like you're receiving information of some sort, or downloads, or just you're just so connected to some sort of mystical experience or energy or whatever, however you want to describe that it's just naturally perhaps being channeled through you. I feel like with this nourishment card, because this is a very I want to say physical reality kind of grounding or nourishment. I feel like there's something about here, especially with the kindness as well. Both of these cards are talking about how to use this information, this spiritual experience, in order to provide kindness or service or nourishment to others, is how this is feeling like. I feel like that's just going to happen naturally for you, because I feel like there will be those individuals being drawn to your energy is kind of how it's feeling. So if we continue on with these ones, we have the vinegar card, which is the first card out. So this card is absolutely an amplifier. It amplifies or accentuates all of the energies around it, all the other cards that come through. So it's a very potent amplifier, this one. And then you have the conjunction card, union and autumn, which is all of this harvesting, things coming together. It's a peak sort of culmination moment is what this is feeling like. And with the autumn, I was just hearing harvesting gold, because I feel like, well, the gold is not necessarily a material or physical thing in this situation. What you're harvesting, Aries, it feels like is kind of spiritual gold or spiritual gifts of some sort. Your harvest, it's kind of the energy that was coming through. If you think of these as sort of spiritual fruit, right? You have some sort of gift, Aries. I want to say that it's almost like you have a ladder in order to reach the top fruit of this tree, is kind of how that's feeling. And so there's people who are going to be coming in for you, surrounding this energy in order to get fruit. And it's kind of you have so much, you have buckets of fruit that you've picked from the top part of this tree, and it's just giving it out, because what are you going to do with all of that by yourself? It's kind of that energy. So anyways, so that's the overall context of your reading. If we get into the actual reading part, all these cards jumped out at once, and they're all extremely like spiritual cards. So I'm gonna like explain all of them individually, but first we have here the Neptune card, Mystical Sister, Quicksilver, and then the Sublimation and Dissolution. So first of all, the Sublimation and the Neptune card, whenever they come out together, these are both very spiritually focused cards, meaning like, so it could be like meditation, right? It could even be that your meditative or spiritual practice, however that plays out for you, is reaching some sort of new height, is kind of how that's feeling. And in that process, right, it's like you're rising up, you're using this ladder to get the top fruit, whatever that means. And I feel like it's like you're bringing something down is kind of how it's feeling. And if you're feeling kind of like this energy of weightlessness, so it could be that you have a lot of energy to accomplish things or something like that, but it's kind of feeling like there's, both of these cards come in with the energy of like, in order to balance this, because this is a very sort of spiritual experience, the balance is to do something that serves other people in your physical environment, because it's kind of like you can become ungrounded in this energy, which is not something that you want, because the whole point of a spiritual practice is in order to bring it into the physical in some way, right? Like there's no point of a spiritual practice if it doesn't affect change in the physical environment in whatever way, right? So I feel like that's sort of the guidance for you. I feel like it's not even something that you necessarily have to work at. Maybe it is something that you will have to work at, but it kind of feels like a lot of opportunities will be presenting. It's kind of like you get a fruit and then a crowd gathers, for example, something like that. Or like you'll be drawn to certain opportunities or experiences in order to, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like distribute the knowledge or distribute the wisdom or something like that, through this experience. And then you also have here, which is so interesting. So the Mystical Sister also talks about service and outreach, right? Because it's also something like, because this card talks about like a foundation of respect and honesty and unconditional love. Because I feel like, Aries, you don't necessarily have to go out seeking people to help, right? That's not what this is talking about. It's more so just talking about like perhaps just being a stable foundation. You might even be representing this tree as well, right? It's kind of coming in with the energy of the giving tree. That's kind of like this, the giving tree, which is really interesting. I have issues with that story just because of like, I don't like how it ends. I don't know, maybe that's part of it. I don't think necessarily, Aries, that you're being asked to give all of yourself, right? Because of what happens in the giving tree. It's kind of like the tree gives its entire life to others. Anyway, I don't know if that's gonna happen, but it's kind of just talking about the giving tree is just happy to give, is what this is feeling like. I feel like what you're giving is some sort of energy of just like perhaps kindness, right? Perhaps just kindness, right? Like just giving freely of what you have, is kind of how that's feeling. Of course, obviously there's this kind of energy of like, not to the point that it depletes you, but I feel like that's not even on your mind yet, because it's kind of like you're in such a positive energy. It's like you have so much to give. So, but it's also coming through with this energy of like, well, there's kind of like a set amount, or it's like you're not going to ever be asked to give more than you have, is what this is feeling like. The giving only comes when you have stuff to give. If this tree is picked clean, then it's kind of like like there won't be people gathering is kind of how that's feeling. I'm not sure exactly where that's going. I feel like what it's saying is that when you have enough to give, you will give. If you don't, then obviously there will be no giving. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. The Quicksilver card is really interesting because this card is Mercury, the element Mercury, the metal Mercury. And the thing about Mercury that's really interesting is that it's the only metal on the periodic table that remains liquid at room temperature. And I feel like that's really highlighting your state right now, right? Because if you think about like the solid state, that's sort of representing like the 3D Earth, the solid state, which is kind of like, it's just like the 3D environment or reality, right? Things that are stuck, or not stuck necessarily, but just like stable. There's not a lot of movement, perhaps not a lot of energy. It's just coming through with like perhaps like stuckness or just like rigidity of some sort, perhaps resistance, right? So this could be, this feels like your energy, Aries. And that if we talk about like sort of the liquid state as being subconscious or just like more free-flowing energies, there's less restriction on it. It kind of feels like for you, Aries, what's happening for you is that you're remaining in this liquid state when everything else around you is solid, if that makes sense. So it's like you're maintaining some aspect of like spiritual awareness, I want to say, in your physical. So an example, again, these are all like really, it feels very spiritual, so I'm not exactly sure how to provide like real world examples of this, but it's kind of just feeling like the dream state is kind of representing that sort of free-flowing, there's not a lot of resistance, not a lot of structure, it's kind of just like being in the ocean, right? That's what sort of the dream state feels like to me. And then when you wake up, right, in this physical reality, there's more structure, there's time, but it kind of feels like you, Aries, are somehow maintaining the free-flowing dream state kind of energy within the physical structure. You are still liquid in room temperature, if that makes sense, metaphorically. There's some sort of like, you're bringing this dream state energy into the physical reality somehow, right? That's kind of how it's like, it's like you're bringing this energy, you're bringing this like metaphysical or like spiritual fruit into the physical reality and giving it to others is kind of how that's feeling, which is really interesting, especially if we look at these two cards coming out next, the sublimation. So it's like sublimation talks about sort of solid to gas, right? So in the gas state is when there's all of this sort of movement. It's a very spiritual or mystical experience is how I would describe the gas state. And then when you wake up, it's bringing it back down. Like you're this bird here. You fly up into this like mystical, meditative, spiritual state. And then you bring it back down into this like spiritual, I have no idea how to describe this. I feel like I don't have the vocabulary in order to describe what this experience is talking about, because the dissolution card talks about sort of like dissolving your ego. It's a very Neptunian, is that a word? Energy. Like both of these cards are talking about that. So it's kind of like but this dissolution card also talks about like dissolving solids within liquid. So all of this sort of like being fluid is what this is feeling like. There's a fluidity about your energy that's just kind of like perhaps like going with the flow, but it's wanting to connect to sort of this subconscious or dream-like energy is what that's feeling like. So I don't know. I'm just going to move on. And I want to sort of highlight perhaps like something physical that may be happening for you. Because I'm seeing these two cards. You have here the strength and the reciprocity. So again, there's a lot of emphasis here on service or what you're able to give to a situation, Aries, because I feel like there's a lot for you to give, right? It's kind of like, especially with the Neptune, this energy feels like a collective energy. It doesn't have to be subconscious related, though I feel like it very much has that vibe for you, where it's like you are accessing some sort of subconscious energy that has an impact perhaps for a bigger collective, and you are able to give to others in a very physical way, perhaps, is kind of how this is feeling. This Strength card to me always talks about like somebody who is perhaps experiencing a blockage or a stuckness, right? It's like this heavy, very earthy, very solid energy that's kind of like it's just feeling like having to use a lot of strength, or like there's resistance in a certain situation. And I feel like, Aries, that because you're able to remain fluid, it's like you're also able to make this solid obstacle fluid. You can also make that, like, it's like you are that state, but also you can help others to transform this energy into a fluid state, if that makes sense. Because you have here these cards. So the first card to come out here is this Four of Pentacles, which is one of my favorite cards in this deck because it's so physical and practical. Because of this deck that I'm using is the Mystical Dream Tarot, a lot of these cards are very like abstract or like spiritual or just like confusing or strange imagery that is very difficult to connect to sometimes. But this card is the most like practical, real life, physical card in this deck, which is talking to me about, but because it's an onion, it was kind of bringing in this energy of like, if you've read the story Holes, it's a book and there's also a movie adaptation. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but the thing about onions is that the two characters end up running away from this camp into like this desert, and they find like onions in order to survive. So this energy here with the onions is kind of bringing in this energy of like perhaps low resources of some sort, or just like people who are like struggling in the physical world somehow and are just fighting to survive, perhaps, right? It's kind of like they're on the run, or they're hiding, or there's some sort of energy here of like they're struggling in a physical way. I feel like that's being emphasized here, right? Like there's people or energies around you that are struggling in a physical way, and it's like this is you, that the Eight of Wands, and then also here the Eight of Swords. So that's the Eight of Swords here, right? The ones who are gathering at this tree in order to gain, I don't know, some sort of nourishment. It could be spiritual nourishment. It's like they're seeking spiritual nourishment of some sort, perhaps needing to transmute some sort of like stuckness in order to get something moving in their life, right? And I don't even want to say that it's a specific person, because the Neptune card coming out is talking about like a collective energy. So it could be like a bigger collective. Anyways, Aries, this Eight of Wands card is looking to me like transmutation. It's kind of like this is you before anyone has arrived, right? It's kind of like you have all of this energy that is kind of like needing to be released or used or transmuted in some way. It's like collecting all of this sort of like lightning strike energy and then channeling it through whatever this service is of yours, that you can, some sort of gift or ability for you to channel this energy, perhaps. Because this always looks to me like she's like transforming this mummy or this like zombified kind of energy, right? Something that's stuck or stagnant, and then transforming it into something that's being able to be used, or the energy's moving again, right? It's turning something solid into liquid. With the Eight of Swords too, it could be, because that often talks to me about kind of like, it feels kind of, which is interesting. I'm just going to leave that. I'm just going to leave that one. Okay. The next card here you have is the Five of Wands, which I really love this card. There's this fish in, so there's fish in a lot of the cards in this deck. I've been dreaming about like a lionfish for the longest time now. So I quickly Googled what that was, because it may provide a message for you as well, that there's something about like good luck. I did a reading a couple weeks ago now. If I remember what it is, I'll link it above, talking about luck, which I feel like, yes, there's such thing as luck, right? Like a sudden gift, I want to say, from the universe that just helps you move along, or it just gives you something that you need, perhaps. But there's also sort of this energy of like being in the right place at the right time. And I feel like, Aries, for you, that something about what you're doing is like you know where it is that people, like where luck is going to strike, if that makes sense, right? Like you know how to be in the right place and the right time. And that's kind of like the skill. So it's like, yes, there's luck. There's a lot of luck here, but you also know, it's kind of like somebody who like hunts for storm, like, you know, like storm hunters, something like that. It's like you purposely work at being in the right place at the right time, like that skill set, right? It's not just about the luck. It's about being there so that the luck can arrive for you, if that makes sense. It's like knowing where luck is going to strike. I feel like that's what this is, right? It's like knowing where the fish are, knowing like what time you should go, what place, like that kind of thing. Which area is going to have the most abundance, that kind of thing. And I feel like because there's two people in this boat, it's like, Aries, you're showing others how to do that, or like you're taking them with you on your fishing trip, that kind of thing. Like you're showing them, okay, it's going to be lucky in this area. And I know that because all of these reasons, right? And it's like you're showing them how or where to start fishing, perhaps. And I want to say that this is also their energy as well. This is the Spirit of Wands. So again, this is just sort of like the people that you will be encountering. It doesn't even feel like a singular person. It feels like a lot, right? It feels like many people. It kind of feels like, so this card talks to me about a temple space. But it's kind of like being highlighted here is kind of like the Eight of Swords being a feeling of being stuck, versus the Spirit of Wands, which is much more kind of like a setting intentions kind of energy, or like making wishes, perhaps. It's an energy of like perhaps like dreaming or creating, or like daydreaming about what it is that you want to create. I feel like that's kind of where it's shifting. It's like once you sort of teach these ones how to fish, metaphorically, it's like they can now, I want to say, get out of this Eight of Swords kind of energy and more into a Spirit of Wands, which is about exploration, right? So it could be that they'll start fishing on their own, or learning how to find the lucky areas, right? Like the finding where lightning is going to strike for them, because it's going to be different for every person. That's the thing. It's not, it's kind of like each person has their own attunement to luck, maybe. Like each person has their own ability or capability to be a lightning rod for themselves, right? Maybe. I feel like you'll be showing these ones how to do that for themselves. It's not like you're going to be like bringing each and every one of them on your trip every time, right? It's just showing them, this is how I do it. This is how I become a lightning rod, or whatever. This is how I explore or like find whatever gold or whatever it is just like adding all of these like metaphors together, but it's like I feel like they're going to start doing that for themselves as well. And then you have here the Three of Cups, which I really love, because again, with the lionfish, right? This is the lion aspect of it. It's bringing in all this energy of power, right? So it could be something with like, I've been watching a lot of Caroline Myss recently, and she talks about that everything that you do, every action that you take is or like thing that you think about yourself, or like everything that you do is a negotiation of power in some way. I feel like for you, Aries, it's coming in with all of this. It's like, because you know, right, in how you think about yourself, or like just this experience of, I don't know what this is exactly, but it's kind of just like saying that I feel like you've accessed or tapped into some sort of power within yourself in order to be able to do this. And I feel like that's what you're sort of releasing into, not releasing. It's like you're helping others to access what this is, right? Because it's kind of like in this state, the Eight of Swords is very much this energy of feeling powerless, right? Feeling powerless within your situation and not being able to see the way out, perhaps. Anyways, I'm getting stuck here because it's kind of like, I kind of find it difficult when readers sort of say that like feeling stuck is just sort of a mindset change. It's not always as simple as that. I feel like that's like an oversimplification, or just like, but of course, sometimes truth is very simple. So there is truth to that, but it's also always like, there's always sort of like you need to learn how to do that. You need to learn how to be in this state. It's not something that you can just do, is kind of how this is feeling with the Five of Wands. It does take training or practice or like learning of some sort in order to feel powerful, or to feel like you can enact change in your life. That takes practice. Anyways, Aries, I feel like that's sort of, so it kind of feels like you're being called to be a teacher of some sort, right? Or it's like take people on a fishing trip with you, for example, which is so interesting because you have here this emotions card, which I really love, with all of this sort of like watery subconscious energy, because this card talks about sort of like the emotional experience, right? That it could be, if you think of like a jellyfish, so how this card comes through to me is kind of like, depending on how the emotions are lit up or how the jellyfish are displayed, it could be extremely beautiful, or it would just seem like it's just darkness or vastness, because jellyfish themselves are very transparent. You can't really see them. If you were swimming in an ocean, they wouldn't be very visible. But if you're in sort of like an aquarium, for example, where they have all these light displays, it's such a beautiful display. I feel like there's something here about how you're framing the situation, Aries. It's like you have some sort of ability to highlight or display the emotional experience, perhaps, into something like really beautiful and gorgeous that somehow transforms something. And I feel like others will be drawn to that because they want to learn how to do that for themselves, is kind of how that's feeling. Anyways, this reading's getting long. I'm going to end it there. We're going to move to the extended and talk about what else you may need to know about that. If you are interested, the link is in the description box below. I'm also doing a sale on my personal readings until April 19th. So if you're interested in that info, also in the description box below. If this message resonated with you, please consider subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.